So when I was about to release my movie 11 Years, Bob Dylan's stealing of James Damiano's songs, Dylan's people found out. They had to try to remedy the situation, so they enlisted the Weinstein Company, headed by the beloved Harvey Weinstein, to produce a movie about Bob Dylan titled I'm Not There. It was their way of creating a diversion. The title was purposely worded to be confusing. Dylan was played by 4 different actors to make the movie as confusing as possible. The plot was purposely distorted, and everyone I talked to who saw the movie said that they didn't understand the plot, or that there was no plot at all. I guess they thought that when people asked one another if they saw the new movie about Bob Dylan, that they would add, it was horrible, or it was confusing, to try to discourage people from watching any new movies about Bob Dylan in the relevant time period. However, the new movie was made as a diversion.
People are always talking about freedom. Freedom to live a certain way. Of course, the more you live a certain way, the less it feels like freedom. Me? I can change during the course of a day. I wake and I'm one person, and when I go to sleep, I know for certain I'm somebody else.
See, you just want me to say what you want me to say.
Once upon a time, you dressed so fine, threw the bumps of dime in your prime. Then you, people call, say it be.
All they want from me is finger-point songs. I only got 10 fingers.
I'm kidding you.
It's not about me anymore, it's all about him.
How does it feel?
That's nature's will, and I'm against nature.
How does it feel?
Could have swore you was an older man.
Well, you used to be much older.
What's with all this doomsday, hocus pocus?
Yes, chaos, clocks, watermelons, you know, it's everything.
Like a rolling stone.
The facts of my lawsuit were not at all confusing. There were 50 hours of videotape depositions that incriminated Dylan.
This is the videotape deposition of Elliot Mintz in the matter of Damiano versus Sony Music and Bob Dylan.
Have you ever lied to Mr. Damiano?
Yes.
Many times, but on those occasions when he would ask me, could I pass on something to Mr. Dylan, I may have said to him, I'll try and pass it along, 4 words to that effect. Fingerprint on a
Not
piece
yours. Somebody else's, sir, such as the defendant.
that never crossed my mind. There would be no way that the defendant's fingerprint could ever appear on a piece of paper that came out of my fax machine and went directly into my file cabinet.
Thank you. And would Mr. Dylan, on occasion, meet with Mr. Mintz in person?
Well, yeah.
The criticism that you've received for more or less leaving folk music for folk rock hasn't seemed to bother you very much. Do you think you'll stick with folk rock, or are you going on into more writing?
I don't play folk rock.
What would you call your music?
I would call it, I like to think of it more in terms of vision music. It's mathematical music.
Would you say that the words were more important than the music?
The words are just as important as the music. There would be no music without the words.
Which do you do first, ordinarily?
The words.
Do you think there will ever be a time when you will paint or sculpt?
Oh, yes. Oh, sure.
Do you think there will ever be a time when you'll be hung as a thief?
You weren't supposed to say that.
This is the videotape deposition of Elliot Mintz in the matter of Damiano versus Sony Music and Bob Dylan. Today's counsel, please introduce yourselves and state your appearances.
Stephen Kramer for the plaintiff.
Orrin Snyder, and soon to be joined by Stephen Hayes for Sony Music Entertainment and Bob Dylan.
We are on the record. With the court reporter, please swear in the witness.
I do.
Mr. Berman, Mr. Mintz, my name is Stephen Kramer. I represent the plaintiff in this case. Mr. Mintz, have you ever gone by an alias?
Yes.
Okay, and what is that alias, sir?
Mitch Berman.
And during what period of time have you gone under that alias?
From approximately October of 1980 through the present.
What is your profession, sir?
I'm a media consultant.
And how long have you been in that profession?
Since approximately, give or take, since 1975, 76. 20 years.
And how long has Mr. Dylan been your client, sir?
Since, I believe, October of 1986, approximately 10 years.
You've spoken with Mr. Damiano?
I have.
Okay. Have you ever lied to Mr. Damiano?
Yes.
And can you list for me the times that you lied to him?
First of all of my conversations with Mr. Damiano were telephonic. To the best of my knowledge, I've never met him. During the course of telephone conversations,
I'd just like to remind you that as per Rule 56C of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, a judge is unable to dismiss a lawsuit in summary judgment unless there are no genuine issues as to any material fact. So in my case, there were 11 years of material facts, and Judge Simandl still dismissed the lawsuit in summary judgment.
Many times, not many times, but on those occasions when he would ask me, could I pass on something to Mr. Dylan, I may have said to him, I'll try and pass it along, or words to that effect. These would be the, and of course, my name. By using the name Mitch Berman, that was not being truthful. Those are the only specific, quote, lies or mistruths that come to my mind immediately, even if it seems out of context.
Sure.
Under the subject of mistruths spoken to your client, During the course of these telephone conversations, he would frequently ask me to pass along information, ask questions about Bob, or to Bob about him. And I, in fact, told him that I would, and that I did. And when I use the expression "pass along," that's a phrase that I use to suggest passing along information verbally.
Expert testimony from a musicologist who graduated magna cum laude from Harvard.
Analysis and comparison of the main melody of Steel Guitars by James Damiano to the main melody of Dignity by Bob Dylan. I define melody as the sequence or ordering of pitches in a single line of a musical composition. That is, melody is the ordering of pitches, which are often referred to as numbers, one being the number of the pitch center or tonic of the composition. And melody is distinct from rhythm, which specifies the timing and the duration of those notes. Analysis will cover the main melody of Steel Guitars and the main melody of Dignity, which I find to be strikingly similar. To begin, I'd like to illustrate the similarity of these two melodies by playing for you what I identify to be the common features themselves, a melodic arc of shared melodic features between these two compositions. This melodic arc is the pitches 1, followed by the pitches 5, 6, 1, and then after a gap, proceeding to the pitches 2, 3, 1. These pitches constitute what I call a melodic arc in that they bear with them something of the character of the melodic phrase, starting with 1, ending with 1, proceeding in certain patterns in between, particularly the 5, 6, 1 progression in between, and the ending with the 2, 3, 1. There's a kind of a melodic character to this arc, more than just a set of shared pitches. What I will be doing shortly is I'll be leading you through an analysis, allowing you to hear.
Let's go back to the Jones Beach concert, if we may, to the time when you offered the tickets to Mr. Damiano before the concert actually took place. Okay? During that point in time when you offered the tickets to him and before he actually went to the concert, did you ever say to him or suggest to him that maybe he should bring some of his songs with him?
No, I did not.
Do you deny saying that, or is it you just don't recall one way or the other?
I deny suggesting to Jim that he bring songs along with him. I did, however, concur with him when he asked me, do you think I should bring my songs with me? I said, sure, why not? What could it hurt?
Tons of correspondence between Dylan's entourage and me. 11 years to be exact. Blatant admissions of guilt by Dylan's own witnesses, and they had no evidence to protect themselves with other than a lying lawyer, Warren Snyder, and a compromised judge, Judge Simandl, who I'd like to talk about now. I could tell that Dylan's lawyers and Judge Simandl were equally as powerful. Dylan's lawyer drew his power from clients he represented, such as the Clinton Foundation, Anderson Cooper, Goldman Sachs, Harvey Weinstein, Mark Zuckerberg, NBC Universal, and Chevron in the Ecuador oil spill. Snyder was trying to fry me on the stand by lying to Judge Simandl about me. And I have to say that although Judge Simandl had the rule in Dylan's favor 100% of the time, even though I could tell he didn't want to, when push came to shove and the preponderance of the polarity of the evidence was in my favor, Judge Simandl protected me, even though Judge Simandl knew that Dylan had nothing to protect himself with. Nothing as in zero. Judge Simandl was also trying to protect the Constitution. So there's no confusion. We weren't in court for the copyright issue. I was on the stand for being in contempt of Bob Dylan's federal gag order designating all discovery materials as confidential, which I disobeyed for 26 years by being on the internet. It was quite ironic that Dylan accepted President Obama's Presidential Medal of Freedom Award by utilizing a federal gag order on me. Actually, it seemed a bit communistic. Also, Dylan never produced a musicologist with any scholarly credentials to refute my musicologist's music analysis. Music is finite. Musicologists can listen to a melody line and identify the notes to a definite conclusion. Finite means like 2 and 2 is 4. Finite means it's conclusive. There's a conclusion. I apologize for being condescending. Some people might not know the definition of finite. With all Dylan's money, he couldn't buy a musicologist to refute my musicologist's analysis of the music. Since music is finite, a musicologist with any scholarly credentials would not be able to lie in court because they were taught and educated at a college or a university in which they represent. Also, there seemed to be a nefarious plan set in place by Dylan's attorney in collusion with the Library of Congress that was prevented by the grace of God. When my attorney and I sent for the materials I registered with the Library of Congress, we received a letter back from the library stating that we would not be able to retrieve the registration for 180 days because it had been misplaced, although Dylan's attorneys had already received them. I believe Dylan's plan was to erase the most pertinent song, Steel Guitars, which bared, as Dr. Green concluded, the same exact melodic arc as Dylan's Grammy-nominated song Dignity, off my copyright registration. I have a great deal of evidence which would suggest that this was Dylan's plan. The evidence is elaborate, however, it concludes that, in light of a motive, it would be considered to be conclusive.